We're here for the Real Estate Roundtable with IPRG, and today our guest is Natalia Harvey from Compass. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
You as well. Good to be here.
Thank you. And Luke Sproviero and Derek Bestrick are here, and we want to talk mostly about, I think, the rental market in New York City at this point, but really anything real estate related, things that we're seeing on the ground, things that we find interesting. But yeah, we're in June of 2025.
Yeah.
Seems like it's been a pretty active rental season so far. So yeah, we'll start it off there. We want to just talk about, whatever it is that you're working on or seeing.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're in the middle of the high season of the rental market. As you guys know, it's a very seasonal market. So from spring to September, we see the highest uptick in the rental market. So we're literally in the middle of it. Rents are high, tenants are competitive. So, I see all positive things.
Mm-hmm.
There definitely, are variances depending on location and product. But overall, I mean, we're happy with what's going on in the rental market this season, and it's been good.
So when you say rents are high, what is that compared to? Is that compared to this time last year? Is it compared to the winter? How much higher are rents, would you say?
I mean, the market has been increasing and growing over the last several years. So year over year, we see increases of a couple percent. But the biggest difference is you definitely see in the rental market, which are seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
So, the same unit renting in the middle of December or, right around the holiday season will rent for several $100s more today just because of the seasonality and just the lack of, demand around those, holiday times and just the winter season overall. It really slows down significantly.
Do you think that's because so many landlords have put their tenants on summer lease schedules? So it seems like everyone's always trying to get their leases to roll in June, July, and August. So I just wonder how much of the market is even available to rent during the fall and winter seasons.
Yeah, so that also is a factor. The inventory isn't really there also in the winter season because the demand isn't there. So landlords are smart and they, work around it and they position themselves so they have these summer expiration cycles. And it's, something that I always recommend to my clients to be mindful of that. If we have even potentially a winter move-in date, to offer extended lease terms to get it on a better cycle, to take advantage of better markets the following year.
Why is the summer season so much better than the winter? Why does that make sense that rents are higher this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Generally, a lot of people come here for work. People graduate, young professionals start working. Later in the year, it's also, when people go back to school. So a lot of students come into New York around the September timeline. So that's usually when there's a big influx of people. It's really, job related and just where people are in their lives. And in the winter cycle, people are less focused on making also big life decisions and big moves. And, come November, people focus on spending time with family. People travel home and just don't make any big moves. And it's just kind of established itself as this cycle in New York and the real estate rental market in New York. And
it's weird. I never thought about that, but it's definitely true. I've never moved in the summer, but it definitely, obviously, in New York is
I always
very
moved
true.
in the summer.
Yeah.
Because I moved here,
Yeah.
After college, and I moved in the summer, and then I was just always on the summer cycle.
I will tell you that every time I've rented, my last lease started in November, and there's not a lot on the market.
You got a nice little discount on that.
Exactly. I was going to say
Not really, because there wasn't anything on the market.
Because you paid the broker fee?
Oh yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah,
but
we will.
Yeah.
No, but it's just there wasn't. I'm at a stage now in my life where I have kids and where I live in Manhattan. I need a big apartment or a bigger, I should say, apartment. and there's just not a lot of that ever. So it was slim pickings for me anyway. It's not like I got a deal. There wasn't a lot. So
larger size units, I will say, are always more competitive. But like you said, there are people that are trying to be savvy and like take advantage of those months to get that discount, but it doesn't always work out in their favor because they just might have to settle for something that they didn't really want because the availability isn't there.
Yeah.
So that's also why, the summer market is that competitive, because people know they'll have more to choose from, but there's a lot more people coming in and just fighting over these desirable apartments. So we see a lot of bidding wars also in the summer season.
Really?
Yeah.
Like stuff going over ask?
Yeah. So I just did a deal in Greenpoint, really nice condo, not amenitized building, 8 family, and really nicely done. And we priced it right, and we had so many people come in, and we got 10 applications with several bids, and we went significantly over ask.
Wow.
And charged a full broker fee.
So why was it in such high demand?
Because there's just that type of product. The inventory is really, really tough right now. And it was in a prime location in Greenpoint, and there just isn't that many units that are priced, first of all, well. Because it's also a strategy that I discuss with my clients, and it's almost like an art to price it just right, to get the sweet spot of making the most out of your investment, but getting the demand. Because landlords tend to just push pricing to the limits, and then you have the opposite effect where potentially, your unit sits on the market, you have to reduce pricing, and you might get less for what you would have gotten if you price it a little bit lower. And that's a strategy I like to go with, especially with private clients, because they oftentimes also care about having the selection of people coming in. So it really depends also on the client that I'm working with, the strategy we go for. So I'd rather price it conservatively and drive it up naturally by creating bidding wars.
Do you usually tell the owner what your suggested list price is, or are they kind of dictating to you, like, this is what we need, this is what we want?
So it depends really on the client. So my private owners, usually they go by my recommendation, and I provide them with a market analysis and data, and I explain my recommendations to them. But I do also work with larger portfolios where they have just set requirements and numbers that they need to meet. So that's usually, where we're pushing pricing, because it's really just, a business strategy, and we need to just accommodate that and meet that. And our team is doing the best that we can. And we are oftentimes achieving these rents and these prices in these cycles. So that's why it's also so crucial to have the proper expiration dates. And if we want to go deeper into it, one of the reasons my clients hire me is because we don't cut corners on marketing. So if you want to get top dollar, we treat our rental listings as if they were sales. So we go all out in our marketing and do the same, as if we were trying to sell it, and we usually move it at the right prices.
I will say though, after I've worked with you a number of times, on personal buildings that we own, and your pictures are very, very good. Like, you look at our current listings are great.
All right, well, let's talk about that. So, I'm starting to see a lot of the virtually staged units, which I'm always kind of skeptical of. I'm like, what does it really look like? What can it really fit? But I think those are starting to get better. I know that with for sale listings, a lot of brokers are doing actual physical staging, like they're putting in furniture and they have that whole side of the business. And then I'm starting to see this AI staging starting to roll out, which honestly, I don't think it looks great. I think it looks pretty fake. But I'd love for you to elaborate in terms of what it is that you're doing for your listings to put them in the best light possible.
Yeah, we work with professional photographers. We still use the virtual staging, and I agree it used to be a lot worse, but it's gotten significantly better, and it depends on the vendor that you use, and we have a list of great people that we work with, and sometimes people are surprised that it's actually fake furniture when they come in. So, it's always good to hear feedback from clients.
Is the
directly.
furniture is it sized accurately for the space?
Yes, because we provide them with measurements of the rooms and ceiling height so they can scale it accordingly. So they are very, very good at making it, natural, and so it doesn't look fake. And we've achieved great results with it. So the actual physical staging for the online marketing part isn't necessary, but we do sometimes opt for physical staging still to showcase certain spaces because it definitely helps, especially in higher price points.
Got it. And what about this AI staging? Have you seen any of that?
We haven't used it because I'm not a fan of it also. Like the AI images, they're not ready yet, I think.
They're not?
In my opinion, it's not.
What's the difference?
So
What's AI staging?
someone sent me this building that he's trying to sell last
Okay.
night, and he's like, look at the listings. He's like, the building came out amazing. And I went on, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, these look unbelievable.
The units.
The units. Like
Wait, it's AI, it's staging more, it's like lying about what the kitchens
it's
look like?
It's on Street Easy, right?
Okay.
And the lighting is perfect, and like the sun is going down, and the way that like the blanket is draped over like the bed or the couch, it's absolutely perfect. And then I look at it a little closer, I'm like, this is all fake. I'm like, what does it really look like? So if I was a prospective tenant looking to rent, all of a sudden, I don't know if I want to go see it because I'm like, what am I actually getting into here? Like, is this worth my time to go?
Like the kitchens, you mean? Like it's not fake though. It's
Well,
just they put furniture.
I'm
in.
sure what the agent did, I assume, is they took a photo of the space and then put it into like ChatGPT or whatever. And
So you're saying
asked
it's like
for,
amazing like lighting,
an upgraded
and
rendering
Got it.
of the space, and then they put them on Street Easy. At first look, it looks great, but then after you look for another second, it looks completely computer generated. It looks fake.
That's not good.
Yeah.
It like looks too good.
You don't want to waste people's time.
Yeah, you don't want to waste people's time. If I'm the tenant, I don't know that I'm going to go and spin my wheels to go see it without real photos.
And it's also not beneficial to anyone because you never want to overpromise, underdeliver, and then they show up and they're disappointed. So oftentimes the feedback we get, people come in and they're like, oh, wow, this actually looks like what it is.
Yeah.
And it immediately creates a better, client relationship, and they trust to move forward with you and work with you because, when you have images online that sometimes don't even represent the actual apartment, people come in and they're frustrated because, they wanted to see the apartment in the photos and they arrive and it's not what it is. They immediately blame the broker. You're not trustworthy. They don't want to work with you. And it's just like, it's off to a bad start. So you want to start on the right foot and be transparent. And I think that's also like a big thing that people value these days because unfortunately our business has a reputation of not always being that, but I think there are more and more agents coming forward and using that approach of transparency, and people value that.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's really good.
All right, well, you mentioned that larger units are very high in demand. What else are you seeing where there's just a lot of demand? Is it outdoor space, like a backyard or a terrace?
And obviously all locations, just to jump in, all locations are obviously different in different markets, but I think from what Derek's saying, like amenities, right? Is that you're basically touching on that?
Anything really.
Like what gives you the biggest rent
I guess
bump?
what I want to know is what is the most in demand and what's the least in demand?
I think it depends on location, right? Yeah.
It's gonna vary from neighborhood to neighborhood.
Okay.
But if you really generally speaking, want to say, I think space is the overall winner. Amenities are still very much in demand, especially in higher end neighborhoods.
What
It's
amenities?
Having a doorman, 24/7 elevators. Those are the basics. Laundry nowadays, I almost don't want to call it an amenity, but because it should be
everyone's doing that.
standard. Everybody expects that. And then obviously we have the luxury high rises that offer, gyms, health clubs, whatnot, roof decks. So those are still amenities that are desired in higher price point neighborhoods. So, on the waterfront, Williamsburg, Dumbo, those are areas where people really go for those luxury buildings, and the price points are really, really high nowadays, and people will pay for that quality, but they still pay close attention to space. So it's kind of like a, dance between the two. But I think the overall market will still go for space, especially, in several Brooklyn neighborhoods, like you mentioned, it depends on the area. Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, up and coming areas that have been establishing themselves, it's still definitely an area where people are looking for space. Ever since COVID, people started working from home. So people look for that extra, square footage because people spend a lot more time at home, and outdoor space also has become a big
Outdoor
one.
space.
Yeah.
What about on like the low-rise buildings that don't have elevators and gyms and roof decks and like all like not the new construction on the waterfront, but what if you just go in a little ways? What's the most in-demand units, for like a low-rise type of building?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the boutique type 6-8 unit buildings, 10-unit buildings.
Yeah, so those smaller footprint buildings, I think, are best designed for 1 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms in those kind of properties tend to be very tight.
Yep.
So those have seen, a slight decline in pricing, but overall very stable. But 1 bedrooms, definitely, we've seen a much bigger increase in pricing because people just, don't want to live with roommates anymore and just like want to have their own space. And
So this is actually interesting. I'd like to dig in a little. So if someone has a building and they have the option of doing like a nice 1 bed with a lot of space, or they can maybe do like the Tetris style and squeeze in like 2 or 3 bedrooms, like what kind of rents are they getting for those different type of units? And
the whole thing is the argument, and I agree with you what you're saying, what you're bringing up. The argument is people are worried about just making, since a lot of our clients, a lot of people we're talking to, they're redeveloping these buildings, so they're choosing, like, should I make them 1? Should I set them up so they can be 1s? But if the rents, if the rental market gets crazy, I can flex them to 2s, or I can take the 2s and make them 3s. But when you do that, it's not permanent, right? These aren't permanent 1s. People are very afraid of making permanent 1s or permanent 2s when you could do the flex 2s or the flex 3s.
Also, say that a 1 bedroom is going for $4,500 for a nice big 1 bed.
Yep.
But a small, shitty 2 bed.
Yep.
Or 3 bed is going for like $5,200 to $5,500.
Yeah.
Across like 6 to 8 units in the building. I mean, that's $6,000 to $8,000 potentially in income a month. It could be $100,000 difference on your NOI.
Yep.
That's $1 million in a refi, and obviously more in a sale. So,
but
what should owners be thinking
I
here?
mean, I definitely understand that approach, and there is a point to it, definitely. It really depends on the floor plan, and what I like to do is closely review, especially in early stages of developments, layouts, because there are options where you're absolutely right. Like, you can do, a good size 2-bedroom still, or a good size 3-bedroom still, and push that price point like you discussed. Maybe not, to the top price point for a 3-bedroom in the neighborhood, but like you said, a less desirable 3-bedroom will still get you more than like a top price point 1-bedroom.
Correct.
But there is a limit to that where you can do it, because sometimes these spaces become just unusable. And when you have like these tiny bedrooms where you can barely fit, a twin bed and a dresser, you also are facing vacancy loss. And then, you're facing a lot of turnover year over year, because even if you find a renter, they will leave again. So it's coming with a lot more risk. So it really has to make sense numbers wise. So I like to review the plans and give proposals on what I think this layout can go for, or this layout can go for. The flex units that you've mentioned, for example, oftentimes what I see when we have a 1-bedroom that could potentially be flexed into 2s, they rent for the same price. And the 2s sit a lot longer on the market versus the generously sized 1-bedroom. So that's what I'm saying. It really depends on the unit and how usable it is. But I advise against squeezing the second flex room, because, you have to discount your rent significantly. And you're in the 1-bedroom market at the end of the day anyways. And it just has a negative effect overall. So I don't recommend it all the time. Yeah.
That's interesting.
What part?
No, it's just that tenants are really gravitating towards better space, bigger
100%
bedrooms,
they are.
and
They're humans. You want space.
Yeah, trying to jam in that extra bedroom, because the rule of thumb used to be like an extra $1,000 a month for an extra bedroom.
Well, the extra bedroom means you're taking away from your living area. Like, what's more important? Like, I always thought that it's more important to have like a living room and living space than the bedroom, right? Because the bedroom you're just sleeping in. But if you have like no living room, it's an issue. Like, what is your opinion on that?
No, I agree 100%. Living space is just as important. I think it used to be different, but times have shifted. Again, especially because of the work from home culture. The living space has become very, very significant.
Living space being like living room.
Living room.
Yeah, not the bedroom.
Exactly. So that's also why we briefly touched base on this before our recording here, that back in the day, you know, I was doing a lot of rentals in 2015 and the landscape was very, very different. Living rooms didn't matter. Especially, you know, I was heavily involved in the East Village. And it was a lot of, you know, students coming into town and they just wanted to be in those prime areas. And that was the time where flexing those rooms and squeezing every square footage into a bedroom made sense. But, you know, that was 10 years ago. And the markets definitely have changed and COVID had a big impact on that. And people are now looking for different things. And, you know, getting rid of living space in order to get a second bedroom to have a roommate in a space isn't necessarily the thing to go anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. I mean, some of these bedrooms we see that are like 7 feet wide or 6 feet wide.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be 8 feet, but we
People
all know how
come
that
in
goes.
and they're like, where am I going to put my bed?
Yeah.
And, you know, we try to like measure it for them and show it to them, but I understand it. They're very, very tight rooms, and then, you know, you make a commitment, you rent a space for 12 months, and then people often have furniture, and they're like, I can't put my bed in here. And,
Yeah.
you know, what are you going to do?
Let me ask you this question. This has come up a little bit. There's somewhat of a debate that I'm hearing now about adding additional bathrooms or maybe taking that space and making it like a closet instead. Do you have any thoughts on closet space versus bathrooms if there's a little bit of extra space that could be used?
I am always team closet space because I think storage, especially in New York City, is never enough. And it's a big thing that comes up amongst renters, especially because in the condo sector, developers will make sure that there is enough closet space, but when you're looking at the rental market, it's really, really minimal. And tenants complain about it, and it's a real problem.
Yeah.
So I would opt in for better closet space at any point, especially if you already have like a 1 bath plus. You don't necessarily need a third bathroom or like another powder room, you know, so it's definitely important to pay attention to closet space. I had a developer that did a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 bathrooms, and I asked him, why didn't you do a walk-in closet instead?
It was a 2-bed, 3-bath.
Yeah, and it didn't make sense and it wasn't necessary, but it was the same question that was raised. He thought, you know, everybody gets their own bathroom, and then when they have guests over, it might be a nice perk. And I just, unfortunately, I came in after the fact when it was ready, and I told him, like, it wasn't the right call because we were missing closets in that apartment. Yeah.
What about like basement storage? Is that a pretty valuable amenity or thing to offer?
If you can do it,
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, because people have suitcases, you know, seasonal items, and where do you put them? People usually don't want to go out and rent, you know, a monthly storage space outside. So having that in your building, it's really valuable, and it's just nice to have to also declutter your own apartment.
Yeah.
So what about like outdoor? Like, what are the best? So you said washer dryer is not an amenity. Let's say like another half bath is, or outdoor space. Obviously, like washer dryers, like not washer dryers, dishwashers. What's the best? Like, what can someone really get the biggest bang for their buck when doing an apartment rental?
Dishwasher and laundry.
Yep.
Those are the staples. You have to have it.
Yep.
Outdoor space is great, but it's not a must-have for every renter.
Correct.
Right? So you're really just looking at the pool of tenants that you're working with, and it's a much greater percentage of people needing to have laundry, needing to have a dishwasher. And then you have, definitely there is a market for outdoor space where they say, I can't live without it, but most people will say it's a nice to have. And this is also always something I ask my renters when I work with them. What are your must-haves and what are your nice-to-haves? And that's usually the two categories that these fall into.
How much are tenants willing to pay for outdoor space? Like what's the premium on like a private outdoor space?
Ballpark, again, depending on the neighborhood, like for a nice balcony, in the Bushwick and Bed-Stuy areas, I would say $100, $150 at most if it's a really nice outdoor space. For a backyard, $300, $400, $500, depending. But in prime neighborhoods, obviously that's going to go up also as rents go up. So that's going to increase as well.
Yeah, I would think I agree with you. I mean, I think it's just such a game changer to have it. I mean, a real outdoor space, not just like a balcony, but to have like a roof deck or backyard, it changes your entire experience.
Yeah.
I mean, someone in this office said they pay $1,000 a month for outdoor space, and I don't know if that's
that person also has a dog though, and that's big.
That
right?
I believe though, in higher price point neighborhoods, 100% $1,000 is not, unreasonable to upcharge for a backyard.
It's a lot of extra space too.
Yeah, and like imagine having a dog. People with pets. People love their pets. People will spend a lot of money on their pets. So, especially the backyard factor. Balconies less so because there's only so much you can do with it. But yard space is definitely a big one for people.
So I'd like to talk about concessions and just get a sense of what people are doing. Like there was a period of time when a lot of landlords were like grossing up the rent and offering like a month free. And is that still like a trend for people offering like higher rents but 1 month free? And then, what happens when the lease expires? Does the tenant get another month free, or is the landlord basically saying you have to pay the full rent? Like, how's all that stuff playing into the market at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it really is an interesting topic in general, like with the concessions. It's a big thing for new lease ups. When you have a fully vacant building and you're trying to lease it up, depending on how big the development is, you offer these concessions to incentivize people to come in. And oftentimes the developers will try to, the following year, not offer the same concession, but tenants have caught on to that and they now are asking these questions ahead of time, and they're asking what's going to happen to my rent next year. And people do try to pre-negotiate options to renew, where the landlord is sticking to the same concession structure, still pushing gross rents, whilst offering that same concession to keep the increase reasonable for that tenant year over year.
Why do you think landlords want to gross up the rent? Does it have to do with like the refinance value or the sale value, or is it like a good cause eviction type of thing where they want to like make sure they're keeping the rent high enough so that they don't end up getting stuck below market?
I think it's a little bit of everything.
Okay.
I think mostly it's a focus on the refinance aspect. It definitely helps in the resale value as well because you have a higher gross rent roll, and this is what's being paid attention to. With the good cause eviction laws, in certain neighborhoods, even with the gross numbers being higher, you don't really reach that limit. Especially in Bushwick and Bed-Stuy neighborhoods, they're still going to be subject to good cause eviction. Unless you have a newer construction where the new certificate of occupancy, you're exempt from that. So we see also a lot of the alterations to bypass that good cause eviction law because everything else is subject to that has CO issued prior to 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good cause eviction, I think the rate of increase allowable right now is like 8.79%. It's like almost just a little under 10%. When renewals come up, are owners able to get basically that full good cause eviction like increase?
I mean,
are owners asking for that increase? Are they offering something less? Like, how's that playing into renewals with existing tenants?
Yeah, I mean, usually landlords opt to go with market rates, so that's not necessarily dictated by the good cause eviction, caps. And I mean, it's a very generous increase amount anyways, and usually you're not able to get close to 10% on your year-over-year lease.
Yeah.
We saw that a lot after COVID happening because we heavily discounted rents, and then we just came back to the market. But nowadays, standard increases are like between 5 to 6%, and those are already, getting pushback from tenants. So landlords are trying to obviously keep their renters in place. and just keep it at market rate. Eventually, they will try offering higher renewals, but if the tenant is pushing back, it's better to keep the tenant than having to, re-rent it and not necessarily getting the same rent on the open market. But obviously, unless your unit is currently undervalued, you're going to let that tenant go and rent it, for the right price on the open market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
That makes sense. I mean, are you seeing that a lot? Like the good cause?
We haven't really dealt with it all too
Yeah.
much. It hasn't been an issue for us at all, because it's still within the limits, and it hasn't come up as a conversation with our renewals just yet. So we're not really struggling with it.
And people from our side of the road, people are definitely underwriting to it, right? I mean, people, when they look at these buildings with low rents, they have to take it into consideration. But and we're seeing it too, right? A lot of tenants obviously know about it, and they're exercising that, and it's tougher on to price out these free market units.
Yeah. So that's why it's very important, when you do a new lease up, to have the right team in place and get your numbers right. Because unfortunately, like you said, like when you're stuck with a below market rental, then this is when it's becoming a problem. So yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying you're involved a lot of times before people start developing. They're having you look at like layouts before they start actual construction.
Yeah, some of my landlords, we do that for them. So we really sit down together and game plan, and I'll advise them accordingly depending on what it is that they're trying to do. If they're going down the rental route, you will develop it differently than if you're going down the condo route, because you need to plan your layout slightly different, and the demands and wants of the different groups and clientele is just a little bit different. So you tailor it towards a renter if you're looking to make it a rental income producing building and hold it, or flip it afterwards.
A lot of our clients are doing the flex stuff still. I mean, you brought that up, and I'm thinking about it a lot that you're talking. You brought it up. It's hard because people are trying to sell these exits a lot of times to these big owners that you're doing rentals for too, and they want the income, right? Everyone's looking at it from a yield basis, and people don't really think about actually just renting the units and have them sit on the market and not have turnover and solid tenants, and they gravitate towards this flex type units so they could sell to a fund, or they could sell to someone that's just looking at rents.
Yeah.
And it must make a lot of these markets in Brooklyn tough, right? I'm sure Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, these are all those type of markets, and the inventory must not be great for a tenant. I feel bad, right?
Yeah. It's that's why, especially well-made units, they fly off the shelf, and that's the apartments where you get the bidding wars.
Yeah.
And then you have those developments that unfortunately have been chopped up into what they should have never been.
Yep.
And then it sits on the market, and you have a lot of vacancy loss, and it's just when you're trying to sell it down the line, these private equity funds, they're also, they're savvy. They look at that, and they look at the data a lot, and they consider and factor in everything that, could happen. And it's higher risk units at the end of the day, and they will come in and price it more conservatively.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing too. I mean, buildings that we own, like we talked about earlier, the bigger bedrooms, the bigger living space. A lot of times these are buildings that you didn't put a lot of money into, but they're just laid out the right way, and they go quick.
Yeah.
And there's bidding wars. People want to live in these units.
People love charm. People love, it doesn't necessarily have to be brand new, and a lot what I hear from people is they're looking for character, because there's been so much new construction and so many developments, and people are slowly starting to get tired of it, and having a well-maintained and preserved pre-war building, and people will come in and see the original detail, and people appreciate it because it's rare nowadays.
And it's less efficient in how it's laid out, so that means there's more space.
You actually get living space.
Exactly. Yeah, it's bigger overall layout. So.
Yeah,
just like the townhouse versus condo argument, where the townhouses are more inefficient. There's wasted space. There's more space, and people really appreciate that compared to the condos, where every single square foot is maximized.
For sure.
Yeah. And
that's why where I live in Manhattan, there's a lot of lofts, and lofts the same thing. So much not wasted space. We use every inch of it, but it's not so perfect where, when someone's building a building or renovating a building, they're maximizing every inch. So it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we touch on the new rent laws?
No, so I was about
right.
to bring that up. The
All right.
Fairness in Apartment Rental Expense Act, the FAIR
Yeah.
Act, which goes into effect next week. So
Yeah. June 11th.
you want to give us a quick overview on what this is all about?
Yeah, so it's really, the purpose of it is to try to make, renting more affordable and more fair for tenants and consumers, and, putting broker fees at the end of the day on the client that hired them. So it doesn't eliminate broker fees, because I think that's what some tenants believe, but what it does is now there's going to be a law implemented that the landlord is going to be responsible for covering the broker fee if they choose to hire their own broker. Whereas now, sometimes an owner can just choose to say, the tenant has to pay the fee, although I hired the broker. And there's always this difference between fee and no fee apartments, and that's just gonna eliminate that whole question. And if the landlord hires the broker, it's always going to be a no fee listing for the consumer, provided they come in without their own broker. So if a tenant still chooses to hire their own representation, they're responsible for paying the broker fee, because they're getting a service and, they have someone
For sure.
acting on their behalf. So it doesn't really eliminate that, because tenants are still working with brokers.
They are?
And yeah, they are.
For rentals?
Yes, for rentals, because, there are people, they have busy schedules, or they, are relocating. The New York rental market is crazy and overwhelming, and they want the help of someone who actually knows what they're doing. And people pay their brokers,
Wow.
especially if you do a good job for them, and they gladly do.
So in that situation, is the landlord, the owner, paying their
Yeah.
broker, and then the tenant is also paying their broker? So there's like two fees, or
If there's two brokers, yes, there's two separate fees.
two separate fees?
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like for me, I never used a broker for like my rentals, right? Like there was a
As a tenant.
yeah, like I didn't like have my own representation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, the
Tenant
landlord
rep.
has rep.
Right.
But yeah, I guess especially like the high end stuff, I'm sure like in Manhattan where the rents are big, I'm sure people do have dual rep, where they want to have people like scour the market.
Yeah.
But now with like Street Easy and all this stuff, like, do you really need someone like finding you an
Yeah.
apartment? I mean, it's like
not
insane.
really about finding the place, because like
Yeah.
you said, it's all available online. You
Yeah.
can do it on your own, but
Yeah.
there are people that just want the extra help, and they don't have time, or they're not here. Oftentimes, people relocating, they have an agent like on the ground, like previewing all of these units for them, and that's mostly like when people will work with someone. But a longtime New York City resident who's been around the block and has done this many, many times over, they don't necessarily hire their own tenants representation. They don't need it, because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
So what's this going to do in terms of rents, especially in Manhattan? Because Manhattan was usually a market where the landlord would hire the broker, but the tenant pays the broker fee. So the tenant would basically sign the lease paying like 15% of the annual
They would
rent
try to get 15%,
upfront,
yeah.
or at least
Yeah.
a month. But now if the landlord has to pay the fee, is the landlord just going to raise the rent and factor that in?
I think that's just the natural development that's going to follow, because
Yeah.
landlords don't like spending that extra money, and that's why they were trying to put it on the tenant. But also, with the no fee listings that are currently existing, it always has been factored into the rent regardless, because I always present my clients with two numbers. We can list it at a higher number as a no fee unit, or we list it as a fee unit where the tenant covers the fee expense, but we get less money for it. So
Yeah.
that has been, it's not a new thing. It's
Got
just, it's been happening already, but now it's going to, become a law and just uniform, where, the broker fee is going to be priced into the rent from day one without it being a question how you want to approach it. But I think that's just ultimately what's going to happen, and it's just going to miss its effect, because it's just overall going to make rentals more expensive for tenants, because now the landlord has to pay the fee.
I agree, and I slightly disagree too. I mean, I like this law. I think that tenants shouldn't have the burden of paying it, and it's spaced out, right? So instead of like coming to the table with like you have to pay a huge fee, and like it's
Yeah.
like the first month rent and then security, it's the owner can just pay it, right? And like
Yeah.
everyone just gives. I'm sure you're not supposed to, but they just give the broker the security deposit and there's your fee anyway, right? So it's not like they should probably leave it in an account, but people do that. I think it's a lot, especially I didn't see it. Is it a big thing in Brooklyn for tenants for landlords to not pay, or do they pay in Brooklyn?
No, I mean in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
most of what I see are no fee apartments.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've been like recommending to my clients because it always, at the end of the day, you make slightly more money over it because the pool of renters is bigger because every single platform has that little checkbox, no fee listings only,
Oh, wow.
please. So a lot of tenants will exclusively search for that, even if it means they have to like stretch their budget a little bit.
Yeah.
Because again, it's priced into it
Yeah.
already. And I fully agree with you. Like
Yeah.
coming to, the lease signing and like having to like put up with, first month's rent, security, and a broker's fee, it's a lot.
It's a lot,
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've always rented in Manhattan, and I think every apartment I've paid the broker. But Brooklyn, I know it's not the same. But Manhattan, I mean, maybe it's changed now, but
Yeah.
it's rare.
Yeah.
And I feel like for the owner, it's like no big deal to pay the broker fee. It's like you hired the broker,
Yeah.
they did a good job, they brought you offers and applications, and
Yeah.
pay the fee. But to put that on the tenant at the lease signing,
Yeah.
it's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like a 1 month fee. Like these people are trying to get real money, like 15%. And it depends what the rent is, but that's a lot.
And for the consumer, the tenant, to
Yeah.
like be negotiating with a real estate professional who's insisting and demanding on 15%.
yeah,
It's a tough position to put them in.
Yeah.
For
So
sure.
I like the Fair Act. I think it's fair.
I think it's going to.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's also going to benefit the landlords in a way because then they also have transparency over the fees. Because, like you said, like brokers will try to charge the full 15%, which I think is excessive. And now it's going to be probably just kept at the 1 month's rent, which is usually what I charge my clients when doing a rental. And then it's also a little bit more transparency because the 15% of the annual rent
Yeah.
was mostly designed to also be split between two brokers
Oh.
when there's like both sides involved. But it just became standard for, the listing agent to collect the full thing, even when the tenant came in without a broker. And the owner might have not even known about that. So it
I
also,
didn't know about that.
Provides transparency to the owner because, your unit might not be renting because your broker is trying to make 15% instead of reducing their fee to a month's rent. But now the owner has control over that, how much they're willing to pay their agent.
I like that.
Which, puts the landlord at the end of the day in a better position also instead of, having the broker have free range and like charge whatever they want and potentially discourage a renter from renting an apartment. So unfortunately, it's still something that's happening. So I think at the end of the day, it will provide more clarity and transparency throughout the whole process, and everybody knows, what they're in for and how much they need to pay. So, it's going to be a good thing in that sense. But on the overall market, it will have a negative impact on tenants because it will increase rents.
It'll increase rents, but it'll be amortized over the term of the lease.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not really a change because, like I mentioned, it's been happening already when you had a no-fee listing. So.
Yeah.
So let's start it off a little bit differently. I have a question. So, what areas do you like the most? So let's say Brooklyn, for example, right? What neighborhoods, or Manhattan? What neighborhoods are you seeing that have like maybe a lot of landlords aren't focusing too much on it, but the rents are just as good as a different area, and there's good pops there. Like, what's your favorite area these days?
There's, two answers to it because
Yeah.
there's obviously, my personal preference and my professional preference
Yeah.
where things are just like moving quickly
Yeah.
and are good markets. But personally, I still think, Williamsburg, Greenpoint are very, very desirable neighborhoods. Dumbo recently, has skyrocketed in rents and people pay premiums on these waterfront facing, or not necessarily being fully on the water, but like these prime neighborhoods. But Bushwick and Bed-Stuy have been really growing a lot, and they have a lot of, cute boutiques, small coffee shops, like lots of charm, and like they're super neighborhoody, and people love that. And, people unfortunately, get priced out of Park Slope areas, and, they tend to like gravitate towards these new developing like neighborhoods, and it's definitely a vibe, and people like those places. and there's a lot of good inventory there as well.
Yeah.
You're thinking like Bed-Stuy, Bushwick.
Yeah. Those
All
are-
of Bushwick or all of Bed-Stuy, or are there certain pockets that you really like
there
where
are
you're
definitely
surprised?
pockets. I mean, Bushwick, anything around Maria Hernandez Park, like
Okay.
that's prime. Like
Yep.
it attracts a lot of people for its nightlife, for just the overall culture in the neighborhood. So that just like is such a hot market right now. The further east you go, the tougher it gets because that part of Bushwick hasn't arrived just yet in terms of like the offering in restaurants and like nightlife and neighborhood vibe and whatnot. Bed-Stuy, Bed-Stuy West, like anything around like Nostrand Avenue, those are like prime neighborhoods. So it's
Really?
really just like the extension of like Fort Greene and Clinton Hill, and it's like moving slowly further east.
Got it.
But if you're still like in that Ocean Hill neighborhood, those are really tough areas.
What about like Lefferts Gardens, Flatbush, Prospect Park South, Windsor Terrace, Kensington? Anything popping off over there? It's been kind of slow.
Windsor Terrace, I think, is on the map now. Like, it's definitely getting there because it's still, you have the proximity to the park. There are a lot of really cute townhouses. Prospect Lefferts Garden, it's an interesting area. So it's like hit or miss. I've seen really nicely done townhouses there that achieved record pricing, but those are like one-offs. In general, I think that neighborhood needs a little bit more time, so it's not fully on the map yet, I would say.
Yeah.
What's the last listing? You don't have to give like an address, but what's the last listing you got where you're like, oh, I'll take this. It's not the best, but then it flew, or you had like more activity than you would have thought?
That's a good question. I wouldn't even, in those neighborhoods, you mean?
Even like anything, like maybe it was, like for instance, I was always surprised. We see a lot of rent rolls, and East Williamsburg. So let's say like by like the Bushwick L, but like even farther out, like more east.
Yeah.
I've seen rents. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like farther out in Metropolitan or out on Powers, rents that are very good. And I just thought you were very east, but I guess there is a train and people really like that little pocket. So I personally was surprised to see rents at that level.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, are you ever surprised by like a rent that you get where you're like, oh, I didn't think this area supported a rent for a 2-bedroom at X amount?
Yeah, sometimes we still see that, but
Yeah.
we're when it usually happens, it's off-market deals, interestingly enough, because
Okay.
we work with a lot of people. Because we have so many listings, we always have a client for something.
Yeah.
And when you have something off-market, it's really easy to pitch it to someone and make it desirable to them because they're the only ones putting eyes on it, and they are then motivated to take it off the market before anyone else gets to see it, and that also helps pushing pricing. So I just did a record, the 1-bedroom rental where we got, I think, $500 from the last rent in place because it was an off-market deal and the tenants just didn't want to lose it. And I did a couple of those. So that was like in the East Williamsburg area. We had a couple of buildings in Bushwick where we had 5 developments in, near proximity to one another. And I had a unit with a private roof deck that hasn't been listed, and we didn't even have a price yet. So we just threw out like a high number and like just see if it sticks. And they're like, we love it, we'll take it, don't list
Where
it.
was this?
That
Not an
was
address, but what area?
That was Bushwick South, actually.
All right, so Bushwick South is one of those neighborhoods I was gonna like bring up that I've seen rents from. Like, oh my god, very surprised. Like South, like you're talking about like the Wilson L area, like that South.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen rents there that are like just as good as North Bushwick.
They're getting there.
Yeah.
North Bushwick definitely.
Maybe not North,
rents,
but you know what I mean.
But why is that
easier.
the case? Why would someone rent for so much down there?
It's very neighborhoody. From my point of view, South Bushwick, you have a lot of townhomes, and they're
There
not
are
brown,
townhomes,
they're
condos.
let's say they're not like brownstones, but like private residences.
Yeah.
Frame.
And it's like a little neighborhood. You have some retail, you have some whatever. I mean, it's
When
just
you're close to like Irving Square Park, like
Yeah.
that area is nice.
Yeah.
But I think like if you get too far east and like past, like you start like passing the cemetery,
okay.
that's like almost like a dead end area where there's not too much happening
Yep.
yet. So we're struggling a little bit with that neighborhood. Just because tenants are a little bit concerned about like accessibility to everything, and it's a little bit off the map. But like there are definitely blocks, and it varies block by block, to be honest. Like in that neighborhood also, because there are beautiful like tree-lined blocks there with beautiful townhomes.
Yep.
You know, and retail is coming up, but like if you go too far east, it's not there yet.
For sure.
Yeah. And that's like also like that corner, you know, where Ocean Hill meets and Broadway Junction and like you
That's a
know,
little south. Yeah, that's
like I've seen developers try to like make it happen, but I tell them it's not happening yet. So
another area that surprised me is like I know we're so focused on Brooklyn in this conversation, but like Ditmas Park, like Prospect Park South.
Surprised you have. I mean, stuff is going for big
like
numbers
people,
there.
Like yeah, I think people are living in people are starting to live in areas that I did not think people would like live in. Like that being one of them, right? Like you're just close to some pretty fringy neighborhoods. So yeah, there's areas where I'm surprised. Lefferts Gardens is an area I thought would have more pops in the rents than it has. I think the retail really holds that area back. I think that's probably the reason. But there's just certain areas have very strong demand, and some obviously don't. But that was one that surprised me that I thought would, because the trains are all there. But
yeah, but the neighborhood is just it's not for everyone.
yeah.
And I had clients that desperately wanted to live in Park Slope. And
Okay.
they just unfortunately couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, let's look at Prospect Lefferts Gardens. You know, it's just on the other side of the park.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to be on the park. And we found the most charming, beautifully done townhouse. It had like a lofty vibe, very tall ceilings. They fell in love with the apartment, and they also had multiple bids on that unit because it was a special one-of-a-kind apartment, and we won the bidding war. They moved in, and then they call me, we hate the neighborhood.
Yeah.
wow.
Boom.
And they moved out after a
that's
year.
terrible.
Yeah.
Boom. I mean, that's what I think. I mean, you'll go on blocks in Lefferts that blow you away. Like the best limestones, brownstones, tree lined. But then you're like, oh, I have to go shopping on Nostrand Avenue.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's the truth about that's the one thing.
Yeah.
And it holds it back.
Yeah.
But
But that's why I was saying that, because people get priced out of like certain neighborhoods, and then it's just a natural like development that's happening, and certain areas will get more popular and populated in general because they can't afford other neighborhoods anymore, and that's just a natural development of New York City real estate. It's been happening for ever. Manhattan, a lot of Manhattan people shifted over to Brooklyn because Brooklyn used to be the affordable one, and now Brooklyn prices are skyrocketing. And
Do you see a shift from like Manhattan to Brooklyn still, or do you see Brooklyn to Manhattan? Are you seeing any crossover between the boroughs?
I mean, there was a big trend from Manhattan to Brooklyn, especially COVID. It's what like kicked it all off. But now Brooklyn is as expensive as Manhattan in certain areas, so it really just depends on like individual preferences where people want to be. But Brooklyn isn't necessarily the choice anymore because it's cheaper. Because it's not in many cases, it's not.
Do you think people are staying in Brooklyn, or do you see people like getting priced out of Brooklyn and like going to either fringe type of markets or leaving Brooklyn altogether?
I think people don't necessarily leave Brooklyn altogether because they're getting priced out of it. That's just circumstantial and where people are in their lives. But they definitely get priced out of neighborhoods. So that's where we see like shifts in where people are moving and again, raising prices in neighborhoods that weren't on the map previously because more people moved there, and it's just
Jersey's one of them. I mean, a couple of people in this office live in Hoboken. The prices in Hoboken they're not at like Manhattan levels yet, but they're damn close. Way more than I thought, and the increase in the last, I would say like Hoboken, a really good Jersey city, in the last 3 years. I mean, it's just huge increases. And then obviously I speak to the Manhattan team in our office all the time. I mean, there's obviously you have the outliers like a Tribeca or a Soho or like Prime Upper East where it's just superior rents to Brooklyn. I don't care where in Brooklyn, it's just superior. But like East Village, Lower East Side, like West Village even, the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom rents are very similar to Brooklyn rents. I mean, they are. I mean, a very solid East Village location, a 3-bedroom there, like that's what you're getting in like good Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm seeing it, Williamsburg
Are
especially.
you seeing a lot of families, or is it like single people or roommates? Is it just
Everybody.
Yeah, it's
everything?
Everybody. Yeah. So.
I mean, one thing we've noticed, I mean, from speaking to landlords, they've said in the last 3-4 years, I mean, the type of tenant, the caliber of tenant that they're seeing in Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and their Brooklyn buildings, they're like serious people, serious business people.
Oh, yeah.
Seven-figure, I've heard the term 7-figure tenants where they're showing that kind of money in their bank accounts, like big incomes, like I think that's been a real shift. So
Because people are renting now.
Yeah.
I've seen well overqualified tenants in my rentals because they opt not to buy right now because where the interest rates are at. So that's
good
also what's
points.
pushing the rental market, because people with serious money, they will still rent, although they could put down a down payment, but they don't want to pay the crazy interest rates that there are right now.
So that's another push that we don't really talk about, why rents are just so insane. It's not just like the rent stabilization laws, it's interest rates, because now these people aren't buying. So now you're adding a whole nother wave of renters. And it's people aren't building because the cost and the whatever. I mean, it's
potentially a good cause eviction. I don't think that it's taking units offline.
It's not taking off, but people aren't moving.
But it could, as it progresses over time.
But the cost of construction
Yeah.
and the tax abatements, or people aren't building, so that's taking away.
And people
then
mentioned the tariffs.
tariffs for building, and then the Rent Stabilization Act in 19. I mean, that's just
And now interest rates.
Yeah.
And low supply for sale inventory.
You're right. There are so
is
many
pushing
high-end
rents.
renters. The
Yeah.
amount of people that I know personally that are renting that easily could buy. It's it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there you go. That makes a lot of sense. That's probably why people, the caliber of renters, it's huge.
Yeah,
If these bidding wars,
100%.
people are like,
Yeah, because people can afford it.
Yeah.
You know, if they really want something,
yeah,
they can afford it. Like, we see a lot of overqualified and financially, like, very well off people just, like, opting to rent.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm also hearing people are just having trouble finding something that they'd want to buy. Just not a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and renting
There's
is
another point. Yeah.
renting's a great Band-Aid. Like, let's look at a year.
Yeah.
Let's rent.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And in some ways, it's a lot more affordable in a lot of ways.
Oh, it is. For
Yeah,
sure.
100% it is.
So-
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
with the rents being high, you don't have to come up with the 20% down plus. You don't have to deal with the closing costs. You don't have to deal with all the maintenance issues.
For sure. The maintenance issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things breaking, ovens, refrigerators.
It's a line item.
For sure.
Heating, expense.
Well, now you're gonna.
All right,
a lot
yeah.
of these units you're paying, but yeah.
Well, I think this was a really good conversation where we went over a lot of stuff.
I think the
I don't
biggest
have
thing I'm
any other
taking
questions.
out of this, I mean, we'll end it here, but I think a big mistake that investors are making when they're gut rehabbing these buildings, they need to involve people like you, rental agents, people that sell condos that know what people want. They need to be more involved. A lot of these people are just numbers.
Yeah.
What I need an NOI here. I need to exit to this. That is something people need to do. What is
You need
rentable?
a person
Yes.
that knows the customer that's
Yes.
actually going to, like, give you money for your product.
Yeah.
That is a big piece that is missing to a lot of these, developments.
Mm-hmm.
Just having, like, that person that, like, maybe doesn't know construction, but I know the person who's going to rent this place, and I
Yes.
know how much it's going to be worth it to them,
Yeah, people need to start doing that. It's a big move. It's a big shift
Yeah,
people should
it's
do it
a-
because people definitely do it on if you're doing a high-end condo project, you're
Yeah.
definitely
You
involving
have
someone
a
like
team,
yourself
yeah.
in there for finishes and layouts because you're obviously selling something for millions of dollars. But yeah, rental people don't do it for rents, and they really should.
Yeah.
It's a big mistake.
It's a good point.
But thank you so much.